Thank you very much, QuickShot. And Rekkles, starting off things right this season in 2018, finishing it up with a win. Now, it looked a little bit shaky a couple times you guys got caught, but overall very clean. What were the lessons you guys learned in your off-season to really take in and just kind of march through for victory in this first game?
So in the off-season, a lot of teams were making changes, and we were one of the few that didn't make many. So most people probably think that we would come in strong. But I feel like with Youngbak coming in and Hylissang coming in, we've actually changed up a lot of things. And in some way, it actually feels like we've changed the team. So I was pretty scared going into today because I felt like we're just playing so differently now that maybe we'll be a bit uncomfortable when we're playing on stage and the stress was there and all that. But actually, it was pretty okay. We had some mistakes with the sideline priority. Like I think I died once or twice overstaying on my side. But it's a different way of playing the game, and it's no longer just me running on my side, and then that's pretty much it. Like we actually have other ideas in mind now. So it's just a lot of things have to go together, and today there were some that didn't. But at the same time, I think we saw a better Fnatic than from last year, because last year was just all about kills, but now it was much more about getting vision and slowly but surely taking the objectives as well.
Yeah, not all the pieces in the puzzle there, but a lot of them already coming into place. Now, I feel like, Rekkles, a lot of people will look at you being pretty much the hardened veteran on this team, aside from Soaz, and think this guy's got to be the leader. This guy's got to be the one making the directions. Are you the in-game vocal leader for this team?
I think the shot calling is kind of split up. Like, people have different obligations inside of the game. So, for example, Roccat takes care of the early game. He makes the plan of which kind of route he wants to take in the jungle and where he wants to gank in the first or second clear. And then the rest of the game kind of depends on the situation, right? Like every game is different. But for the majority, it's kind of up to whoever gets ahead. And I think in this case, we're winning mid really hard this game. So Caps was talking a lot and like constantly saying when he could move and when he couldn't, so that whenever he could move, we would be able to translate his pressure to the side lanes. And then we broke bot tier 1, and then we broke top tier 1. And then from there on out, it was kind of up to the individual. I think we did a pretty good job on talking like when we could move together and get the vision. But as I said before, like we had some mini slip-ups, and I think I just made some mistakes on top. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, definitely not going to be perfect on day one, but it sounds like you guys are really firing pretty well ahead. Now, I do want to talk about your one roster change, because down in the bot lane, you're playing with a new support. Hylissang, he's been around in the LCS for a while, but how is he different from all the other supports you've played with in your time?
So Hylissang has actually been a guy that I've wanted to play with for a long time. I always thought that he was like one of the best playmaking supports out there. I always thought he was just able to step up and make the game-winning play in most cases. And I felt like that was something we were just lacking last year. Like, I don't want to put Jessis on the stand either, because I actually think Jessis played over any sort of expectation. I think he was a really great support, and like coming from another role, like he just swapped role and then still do such a great job. It was just inspiring to see, and I don't want to put any blame on him whatsoever, but I think Hylissang is just a very special player, and having that in your team is just something that you would rather do than having to play against it.
One more piece of the puzzle too. Now, I want to go back to what you said about the roster shuffles, because everybody else really kind of blew up their roster. Some started from square one, some just kind of made a lot of massive retoolings. Just overall, with so many shakeups and so much uncertainty, where do you think all the power lies right now in all the teams in EU aside from yourself?
I think with each year that goes by, the top players tend to want to play with the top players. So I feel like we have gotten worse teams, but we've also gotten better. So it's kind of just more split up than before, perhaps. Like maybe now we have like 5 bottom teams and 5 top teams. But as you could see today, like it just didn't go as it should have. So maybe I'm wrong, I'm not sure, but it just felt like looking at the paper that we had better teams now, but also worse teams.
Yeah, kind of weird how that works out sometimes. All right, well, with all that said and done, one last question I got to ask you, Rekkles, because a lot of people are eyeballing that throne right now. What does Fnatic have to do to take it back after a long 2 years without having it?
So I think one of our biggest problems during these past 2 years was that we were very focused on the short-term success. Like we were very focused on winning these specific LCS games and feeling like kind of the pressure in a way of playing under Fnatic. And I think that's the wrong approach. I think League of Legends is a marathon, not a sprint. And we really need to just figure out how we can make the process better. And I'm very happy to see that Youngbak is a great addition to that regard, because he just brings this whole like structure that G2 had, which we now can take over. And I just feel like in the long run, it's just going to be much better. But as you could maybe see today, we were not as explosive as perhaps before. And maybe we're making some mistakes that you haven't seen before. So in the short term, it's not going to be the same Fnatic as people expect. But I think in the long term, everyone will be really happy. And hopefully we can take back the throne or maybe get to a finals. That would be my goal, at least, since I haven't been to one for 2 years.
Looking forward to see how you guys can do it. Thanks again for joining me, Rekkles, and congrats on your win.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, with that, we're wrapped up for day number 1, so let's send it over to Shox and crew for the post-game lobby, LCS edition.
Welcome to our first EU LCS post-game lobby of the split, where I'm joined by Verius, by Deficio, and by Amazing. Well, a closer look at today, because there's always so much to talk about when it comes to the first day of the split, even though we've only seen one game of each team. But I want to start with Fnatic up versus Splyce, because I feel like the tail end of the day was very exciting. Fnatic starting off quite confident, and then what happened, Verius? Just break it down for us.
Well, I feel like that in the early game, Fnatic, as you rightly said, they seemed to have a lot of control, but when it came to the mid-game map control, that's really where they dropped the ball, and we saw some of the issues that we have seen in prior splits.
Yeah, and obviously some of the issues that might not be fixed by bringing on Hylissang, but maybe where it's more about Youngbuck, as Rekkles just talked about. It will take some time to start kind of ironing out some of those issues in the mid to late game. I think generally they get a little bit greedy. And then they overextend a little bit, and they're like, we can take this one fight.
And then it doesn't help if you have Hylissang, right?
Yeah, that definitely doesn't help when he comes in here. But Splyce was actually really good at punishing those moments when Fnatic were overextending, and that made this game pretty close towards the end.
And that's good, right? Because in the end, we were expecting quite a bit from both teams, so that it was a close game is positive. But on the other hand, not the best start then for Splyce. We had a bit of a conflicting opinion on the analyst desk beforehand. Verius said what they'll build for short-term success, and I think they're going to win the first games and win very fast. Amazing said, no, I think they're built for playoffs and are going to evolve. Turns out, Amazing is correct after
Based
one
on
game.
one game. Congratulations, that's why we hired you.
Arguably against one of the best teams at the beginning of the split.
But I'd like to welcome back to Amazing, just let you talk about Splyce and what you've seen from Splyce today. Was there just nothing to do versus this Fnatic?
I think there was a lot to do. I think they just didn't find the right answers, especially in the early game. They should have just actually expected the Broxer level 4 pressure and just this.
Called it.
Yeah, I mean, at some point it gets obvious, but I think for a new team, like they played in a way where I expected them to play. They played slow but controlled and punished mistakes when they happened. And I think if you're a new team that gets together, you start like that, and then you basically punish mistakes, and then at some point you create mistakes, and then at some point you actually force plays on your own. I think this transition is something we're going to see in the next couple of weeks.
Another big problem for them in this game that made it very hard to play was that Niski, in his first game in the ULCS, I mean, it's one game only, nerves, all these kind of things, got destroyed, like completely. Caps was like 30, 40 CS ahead early on in the game. The mid tower went down very quickly, and it makes it so difficult as a team to play the game when your mid laner loses that hard.
So that is then the question, was he not playing so well? What is certain is that Caps was playing very well on that Azir. He was also the player of the game, decided by the people on Twitter, and I think if it was up to us, we may have decided the same thing. And this was one of the big question marks going into this split, because as I said, you can't make excuses for them anymore, right? Last year we would say, oh, it's the first time around in EULCS for Caps. He overextends a bit too much. This is where we want to see the growth, Verius. So did you see a bit of that today?
Well, I feel like that he did what I kind of expected him to do, which was destroy Niski in the middle lane. I felt like that he held his own. I think that right now he seems to be in a very good position independently. It's just about calming down a little bit. I think that when you have a good start, that confidence can overtake you a little bit. And there were multiple times in this game where you thought, okay, maybe you don't need to be diving underneath the tower without the support of your team. Maybe you don't need to be going for these hyper-aggressive plays when your team is this far ahead.
As said, we can't draw too many conclusions, but it is a fantastic start for Fnatic. And also at the beginning of the day, we started the split with a rematch of the summer finals between Misfits and G2. The new G2 lineup, they came out on top, and they're off to a great start on their hunt for the trophy. We're saying it very early, but when you are the reigning champion, I think that is also in order. Let's take a look at the picks and bans for people who may have missed that game. What was the pre-conclusion, and then how did it play out in the game?
Well, go on. Let us know. Let us know.
Oh, a fight here.
Go. Tell us.
Okay, so I definitely saw like a lot of enthusiasm on Misfits side, I think. They thought they could win lanes. They clearly couldn't. And
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's true.
Basically, for them, if you pick such a comp, like you have to be confident in your abilities, and you actually have to punish mistakes, and you actually have to just be clean on your plays. And I think the plays that they forced with the comp that they had were really iffy. They assumed that the enemy wouldn't be able to TP bottom, and they assumed that the enemy wouldn't be able to respond to the things that they did. So I think when you do that, you deserve to lose in the end. So.
Is that kind of a not Misfits thing to do, with everything that we've learned from them last year?
See, I think this whole talk about Misfits last year and them not being focused on the early game kind of died during Worlds, where they were very focused on the early game, very focused on forcing plays around bot lane over and over, and that's kind of the style I think they were trying to play here. So they're trying to stick to the same way they played, playoffs and Worlds specifically. I just have this philosophy: if you want to tower dive in the early game and the enemy team can show up with 5 members, it's probably not a good idea to tower dive.
I think that's a good rule.
There are some steps beforehand you need to do so the enemy team will not show up with 5 members when you are tower diving, because G2 just reacted instantly and punished it.
They did, and everything went well for G2, but before it kind of exploded and snowballed a bit more, I did hear a couple of voices in the cast room saying, you know what, nothing looks different about G2. They're playing like the 2017 G2. They're playing quite slow. That's right. You guys did say that.
Yep.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, but what is it? What do you mean when you say that? And how do you think that's going to influence how this team is going to evolve?
For me, my expectations were Jankos typically is this early focused jungler that in last split heavily played around the middle lane. So when you pair him up with someone like Perks, you expect a kind of playstyle which is let's get mid lane as ahead as fast as possible. But what instead they did was play very much towards let's play around the overall map, which lanes can we look to punish, what objectives can we pick up, and what mistakes can we look to take advantage of. And it felt like that it wasn't just individual players relying on them to carry, it was a whole team effort, and they all worked well together.
Perks though.
Perks was really good. But Jankos was good too, and Wonder had a great performance. Perks touched on this in the interview where he said the goal is to play slow in the start and work on synergy, communication, macro, all these kind of things, and then you can start speeding up the game later when you have all the basics under control. So it seemed to be a very clear plan to go in and pick the tank comp, not be too over-aggressive in this first game, and it worked out, and it's a great way to learn all the fundamentals as a team.
And he was also voted the player of the game for that one.
Yeah, definitely like the approach. I think a lot of teams come in. I mean, obviously, if you have the individual talent like G2 has, you can kind of take the slow approach. But some teams, even though they have this individual talent, they still try to just speed it up in the early season and just try to rack up wins instead of trying to improve. And I think it's a really unhealthy approach. And I think Rekkles talked about it a bit, where he addressed it a bit, that you jump from game to game, but it's a marathon in the end, and you have to build up for the playoffs, especially if you're a talented roster like G2 is.
However, some teams come out of the gate absolutely swinging, and that was the case in Giants versus the Unicorns of Love. And I just want to take a minute to talk about this, because obviously the Unicorns of Love lost. I'm not trying to make fun of that or anything. I'm honestly happy that this Giant roster of kind of players that have been around the block and have some rookies, or at least rookies for the EU LCS, were able to put on such a performance. It's just inspiring to me.
Well, to me, it seemed like that they played a pretty standard, easy to play comp. It was pretty based around scaling. A lot of the laners were fine, and a lot of the conditions were on the enemy team to force these plays. And when Giants failed, when they didn't succumb to these early plays that UOL tried to force, they then played it very slow, they played it calm, and they seemed to have a good understanding of how to use a lead.
They did, and let's talk about Ruin on that Ornn. That was impressive, Deficio.
Big plays from this guy.
Big plays.
Funny enough, when I saw the old Giants lineup where we had all the current Vitality guys like Gilius and Trubex and these guys, it was rarely about Ruin in the top lane. It was very much about the bottom side of the map. Play around mini Trubex. So Ruin never really stood out to me in Challenger. I always looked at him and said, all right, he looks okay, he's just doing his job. This is a great way to start your little adventure in the EU LCS, where you look more than just okay and you actually outplay 1v2 in the start and great ultis during the game. So great start for him, and he's important because it's one of those players who can bring something new to this team.
Well, yeah, amazing. We're looking at some players like Joko or like Steelback Asset who've kind of been around the block and have not been so successful in recent memory. How much can a good player like Ruin starting the game off like that kind of put the fire under their behinds to do better and kind of refine those things that they were so good at before.
I mean, the thing is that when you have other players picking up the slack for you, like especially in the early part of the season, you kind of speed up the process of actually getting back into the groove as a veteran player, because when you're already winning in the beginning, then you're just like, okay, this is already working. I can get into my groove now and just play my game, and we're still gonna win. And you don't feel that pressure, and it's gonna be still a slow process, but it actually works a lot easier for you.
Just something that Steelback said in the post-game interview. He said, well, I'm quite happy that we could transfer this level that we had in scrims on stage, because that is a problem for a lot of teams. And he also said, I'm happy that we got this win and that they could transfer the lead into a win, because he said that has been a problem with teams that he's played with in the past. And that's definitely something that I can see was a thing for him in the past.
Yeah, and this was only one game, but there were still a lot of good signs, like actually their decision-making as a team, because a lot of it was not individually just outplaying Unicorns of Love. They made way better calls in terms of when to lane swap and go for a turret, when to how to react to Unicorns' play, and as he highlighted, how to close out the game. And it's rare a team that we would look at and say these guys are going to be down the bottom can actually cleanly close out games. So that was really good to see, and it also shows it's really hard to predict based on just the rosters in the preseason who's actually going to beat each other.
My only caveat to that would be the composition that UOL drafted. I think it did pigeonhole them into relying on getting an early lead, and once they didn't get it, they were constantly playing from behind, and there were a number of occasions where they found picks, and with a better comp and perhaps a stronger team, they could have better punished those picks and turned them into something else. So I'm still a little skeptical of Giants. I like.
I mean, it's one game. We're not
It's promising things, but I'm looking for it. It excites me to see what else they can do moving forward, because as Deficia says, there are promising things from this team.
Yeah, and Unicorns of Love, obviously, it was a false start for them, and I think that's also how they're going to have to look at it and then reset for tomorrow. The next game I want to look at is Schalke versus Roccat. A bit of a false start for Schalke as well. They played without their AD carry upset due to a medical emergency, but they still managed to take the win after an impressive performance. But Boris.
Roccat cannot play against teams with subs. Like, it just goes horribly wrong for them.
Yeah.
They actually tried to punish the sub down in the bot lane.
The last team that started the split with subs won the split.
Is that how it works now?
I'm just saying.
Ooh. I did predict Schalke to be fighting for first place, so
there we
I guess
go.
it fits.
So obviously this is a false start. It's really crappy. Vander had to step into the AD carry role. They weren't prepared for this at all, but that was, by the way, a really nice play. But I want to put this in the context of what that then means for Schalke and for their mentality, because I can assume that they were a bit beat down before, right? And the incidents of the day. But this has to give you so much confidence, because your other guys, Nukeduck played out of his mind, Vizicachi played out of his mind. It's got to give you hope.
It should give
Not
you
just
hope.
hope.
But then again, Roccat just didn't do anything, you know? So for me,
I mean, they died a lot.
Yeah, they died. They gifted gold, that's for sure. No, it's like when you're up-and-coming talent that has obviously practiced with you for a long time now, like they've been boot camping and everything like that, goes out, and then suddenly you have to come in with an emergency support and Thunder playing AD, and then you not just win laning phase, but you also win mid to late game and don't even lose out on a mechanical level.
Or it means your macro is so incredibly on point already.
Probably, but I don't think that macro made Roccat lose early so hard. So that's just it.
I'm just happy to see that there was a lot of focus on strategy and not just Schalke like 1v1 killing Roccat over and over, because a lot of it was built around mid lane pressure. So a priority for Nukeduck to roam first, they timed it correctly with the early dives on top side, and then down bot lane later. Those are just good early plays from Schalke that I could imagine they've been practicing a lot in scrims, and just seeing that translate to stage in game one is a really good thing.
And when it really mattered, even when Schalke were 2 members down and it looked like there was going to be a Baron, Vander, the hero, stepped up and had a fantastic
Discount forgiven.
Discount forgiven. Yeah. He's the true next coming of Sven.
He's not giving away the carry spot.
What next coming of Sven? Hansama? What Rekkles? No.
It's Vander.
It's time for Vander. Well, fantastic stuff. And regardless of how it happened, with that win, Schalke have secured themselves an early lead in the standings along with G2. along with
one game.
Fnatic, and also along with Vitality. Now, I know it's only 1-0, but there is the question of morale and getting up to a great start. And then obviously on the other side of the coin, not looking too deep in losing only one game.
It's quite interesting because I had this conversation with Sheepy, and he was talking very much about how usually at the very start of the split, if you lose a couple of games, it's not the end of the world, because if you work with the team and everyone understands our process is growth and our goal is to be better at the end of the split, then people understand and they don't take the losses too hard. But the other side of the coin is when you have a lot of young players joining a new roster, having that confidence boost of getting that win can do a huge amount for your mentality, but it can also have a negative effect on the sense of maybe I'm not good enough to compete at this level.
Just before we go over to the next topic, we're hearing all this talk from every interview and also from us saying, hey, we're looking at playoffs, we're looking at long-time growth and evolving. So who is then the best team after today?
So based on the
What you've
preseason
seen,
and today, or just the games today?
The games.
I mean,
if I had only today's games to base off,
Yes.
I would say that right now
You
G2
do.
are the strongest
Yep.
team in the league right now.
yeah. That's pretty. I mean, Schalke. I'll say Schalke as well is up there.
I actually think Fnatic.
Including their sub.
Based on just
Fnatic?
today?
For me, the way that Fnatic played was just like, you heard Rekkles talk about it too, that their macro focus was way better than I expected it to be. That they actually won, even though they told us something that we already know, that they sometimes do. But I felt like the approach to vision is something that I didn't see from Broxah especially, and the approach to actually finding engages is something I didn't see from Broxah either. And I think this evolution in terms of what they do, especially on Caps and Broxah, is something that bodes well for the future. So I think after today, I would actually expect them to beat other teams.
I was a little bit disappointed though with the first moments where they were trying to set up for Baron. I know you talk about Broxah's vision being better. I assume you mean a lot about the early game there specifically, because I think around Baron, they were fairly sloppy in setting that up, and they were suddenly being like, it looked like they just said, okay, this setup is not really working. Let's just go back to pushing lanes really aggressively. And that's when Rekkles and Hillesing got caught the first time. And that suddenly slowed down the game a little bit for them. Splyce got a full reset in terms of vision in their own jungle. And it looked much harder for Fnatic to close out this game than I thought it would be just from watching the early game.
Yeah.
Early parts of the season, that can happen. I definitely agree that Fnatic showed really good things early on. But I didn't feel like they looked much better macro-wise than last split,
Well,
just based on this game. One game.
Points. It's obviously a bit of a silly question as we've only seen one game from each team.
I say Vitality instead.
Yes, Vitality. I was gonna say, we didn't talk about them much yet, but Vitality had a fantastic start. They beat H2K, and we also had our eye on all the rookies today. And in that match, we want to highlight the Italian stallion. Jizuke, fantastic job. And he was also very confident in his interview after the win against H2K. Let's take a look.
9-0-6 in your first game on the EU LCS stage. How does that feel?
Well, I couldn't ask for a better debut for me. Like, I went on a comfort champion, and I rotated well in the early game, and we just destroyed them early game.
I love how he pauses like 1 second and we just destroyed them early game. But it's fantastic to see because we had our eye on all these rookies, and a lot of people are talking about Upset, who unfortunately didn't see many true packs. But Jizuke, man, fantastic start, and for the whole of Vitality. So for someone who may have missed the match, how can we TLDR what Vitality did today, Verius, against H2K?
Good early game. Is a TLDR.
What did God Gilius do?
God Gilius actually invested a lot of time towards the top side, and Jizuke just largely helped. Their focus was, let's try and get Kabashad ahead, let's try and get him snowballing on the Jace, put him in a good situation, and also shut down Smitty J, who, after hearing Veteran, it does sound like he's a part of the core member of this team in terms of, you know that he's one of the leaders and so on that they rely on. So by taking him out, I felt like Vitality seemed to have H2K's number.
Yeah, that kind of answered the question that I had about them, that, like, obviously the dynamic of the roster has changed. Like, Rune was someone that you can just, like,
leave alone.
Just leave alone and just hope that he doesn't die, and he didn't. And Kabashad is someone that demands a lot of resources. So did Mini Tupacs in the challenges especially. So for me to answer that, can the bottom lane survive on their own instead of the top lane? Yes, they can. And can they play towards the top side? Yes, they can. So I'm actually fairly impressed with their debut.
Yeah, and I was just really happy to see how aggressive they were playing, especially Jizuke in that mid lane, because the moment he got an advantage after roaming top lane, like, he just went all in at every single opportunity. And seeing that from a player who is a rookie, first game on this stage here in front of a crowd as well, that is just fantastic and just what I wanted from this Vitality team, because they seem very confident, they talk a lot, they really want to show they are the best, and I was just afraid they would come in and they would be very nervous.
They are
but instead, they just went all in.
They are so vocal too. If anyone has the opportunity to come to the studio, they will hear these guys laughing, yelling,
It's perfect.
cheering. These guys have so much energy, and it just makes them the most exciting team since Misfits.
Set of rookies.
Set of rookies. Oh, now
most
you
exciting
do
set of
consider
rookies
it. Yeah.
since Misfits.
Well, as maybe an end note to that, Amazing did say, well, the real question is not...
What did he say?
He said, well, the real question... You were there when he said it, by the way.
I don't really listen.
The real question is not what... Well, they know they can win, and they've won, and of course everything goes well. But, you know, we'll have to see if it goes a bit more difficult. But it doesn't look like it's going to get more difficult right now.
My only concern for Vitality right now is they seem like an emotional team. If things start to go wrong, can they maintain their composure and bring things back, right?
But we don't want to be party poopers, you know? They're doing good.
They're the best in the world.
Yeah. Will Vitality win Worlds? We don't know, but we will know what they will do tomorrow. Let's take a look at the schedule. We will be back tomorrow with 5 new games, kicking off with Giants versus Vitality. Vitality looking to keep that momentum after today, and we're going to start at 5 p.m. tomorrow. Let's take a look. So Giants versus Vitality, the grudge match also. Well, it's not grudge, but it's kind of...
Ruin versus his old team, trying to prove this is what happens if you invest in me.
And on that note, for the rest of it, Splyce UOL could be very close. H2K Fnatic could be a very tough one for H2K after what we saw today. What are you guys looking at?
I mean, that Fnatic H2K game, you know, H2K struggled so much in the early game against Vitality. Fnatic should be even better than Vitality playing early on in the game. So this H2K lineup, and especially Kadrill in the mid lane, needs to show a much better early game performance.
That's what we want to see tomorrow. Is there anything else specific that you guys want to see from any of the teams tomorrow? Amazing.
I want to see Misfits recover. Because after today, they didn't seem that strong. They couldn't really find answers in neither the pick ban nor the actual game. So I expect them to revamp the pick and ban and think about it again, because they also had a talk on stage about it. And I'm definitely sure they wouldn't lose to a Boris Schalke, but I think they will definitely have to just step up the play and see what happens out of it.
You don't think Vander Carry can do it? No,
I believe.
I just want to challenge this idea that Misfits played bad. To me, I felt like that they had a clear strategy going in, and they played towards the strategy that they want to do. Their execution was poor, which I think is a team synergy thing, which in the past we've seen for Misfits can take a little while to build. But overall, I still think there are a lot of good things from the side of Misfits. And for me, assuming that if Upset comes back, I think that the match will be a little closer. But to me, Misfits are the favorites in this head-to-head.
Yeah, that's a great point. Obviously, we wish Upset the best, and we hope he's back to play in that fantastic game. Well, that'll do it for us for today. Obviously, that is tomorrow. And after our broadcast, stick around for the NALCS Academy, which starts with a clash between Team Liquid Academy and TSM Academy. And if you missed any of today's action here in Berlin, all of the EULCS will be rebroadcast following the competition in North America. So a lot of league to watch for you guys. But for now, though, that's it from our studio. It's time to call it out. Thank you guys very much for watching. We'll be back tomorrow at 5 p.m. for more battles in the EULCS Spring Split. Until then, have a great night.
It's good to be back.
Yeah.
High five. High five, man.
Leave him hanging.
High five.